Hi, I'm Laura.
I am Deanne.
And I am Philippe.
And welcome to our Lymond book club. We are reading The Disorderly Knights by Dorothy Dunnett, and we are on part 3, chapters 12 and 13. Philippe is going to lead us through a discussion of these chapters. Before we get into the details, any thoughts you guys want to share?
These were great chapters. I love chapter 13 so much. It might have been my favorite chapter, like, so far, just in the 3 books so far, like just from the satisfaction of the scene and just having, oh, so good. Like just having Lymond explain things and people listen, and oh, so good. I loved it.
How about you?
Yeah, I have to say, even to this point, 3, almost towards the end of this 3rd book in, there's still moments in Dunnett where I'm reading and I just phase out because I either don't get what's happening or I'm not interested. And there was none of that in this chapter. Like, everything was clear and concise. I understood every single thing that's happening and could trace it back to when it happened in the book, which was great. A lot of what we had been suspecting is now laid out in the open, finally.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was even some things that I didn't quite catch.
Yeah,
which
same.
is not to say I would catch everything, but yeah.
Right. There's a couple of things where I was like, oh, that's what was happening. So yeah.
I also,
and there was one big reveal that I did not expect, which I was excited about.
I'm excited to hear what that is too. Oh, I think I might know. We'll get there. I really like how these chapters are placed back to back because basically they're the same. It's 2 trials for the future of St. Mary's. One is sort of, levied against Lymond by the Queen Dowager. And then the second is levied against Gabriel by Lymond. So I really like how they juxtapose each other and they're just sort of back to back. So
yeah, it was nice to read these 2 together.
Yeah,
I agree.
Definitely.
Good choice, Laura.
My favorite thing in these 2 chapters by far is the moment where you think Richard is about to deny Lymond, and then he stands by him and he's like, "No, we're not gonna wait. We're gonna get him now." Yeah. And like the first time I read that, I like jumped up and cheered because I was like, "Thank God, Richard."
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
Yeah. I have a little note that just says, "Yay, Richard!"
Yeah, me too. It's like, "Yay, Richard!"
I was like this close to doubting him, but he came through.
Yeah, and just like the little description of Lymond's like body language when Richard stands up and says no, and I'm just like, oh no, it's gonna end in disaster, and it didn't. I was very excited.
Yay! All right, should we dive in?
Yeah. All right. So chapter. Oh, I'm on the wrong page. Sorry. Chapter 12, The Crown and the Anchorite. I went back to chapter 11. Let me just get to the right page. There we go.
55.
So we're in Falkland, which is where the Queen has a summer palace. It's that north little section of Scotland that sort of juts out. Anyway, so
I have a quick question about the title. So The Crown and the Anchorite, like obviously the crown is the queen, the Dowager Queen, or the power. So the Anchorite though, because an anchorite is like a nun who lives in a room at a convent and never leaves that room. Like they're anchored to one room and they don't leave it. And like food is passed to them through a window and things like that. So who's the anchorite?
I have no idea. I did not know that that's what an anchorite was.
It says an anchorite could be male or female. So maybe it's a joke about Gabriel. Like he should.
Oh, maybe. Because the anchorite would be so, I guess the major anchorite I know of is Julian of Norwich, but so maybe, yeah, because they're so devoted and they're supposed to be like otherworldly, holy kind of.
An anchorite is someone who, for religious reasons, withdraws from secular society so as to be able to lead an intensely prayer-oriented, ascetic, or Eucharist-focused life. So maybe that's what Gabriel's like, pretending to do, even though like what he's actually doing is the opposite, because he's super got his hands in all of secular society and he's trying to take it over.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So there's not an anchorite in this chapter. But yeah. Okay.
So Lymond shows up at sort of this inn in Falkland. He's not going to see the queen yet. She's not ready for him. That'll happen the next day. He does some sit rep at the tavern, sort of to hear what's about. And we sort of see Adam's point of view when Cormac O'Connor shows up. And Cormac is a little bit shriftier than we thought, because he actually is able to track Lymond because he recognizes Adam and goes right to the end. They sort of try and start a tussle with Adam, but Adam is well prepared because of his training at St. Mary's. Lymond comes out and they start a scene, almost get into a fight, but of course Lymond dissipates the situation by bringing him inside to drink so they can discuss some things. And there is just more talk about, I don't know what I wrote. Sorry. It's about the scandal, the George Paris scandal. I wrote GP and I was like, who's GP?
Yeah.
So yeah, which I don't care about George Paris at all.
Yeah,
so
he's totally just a MacGuffin to get things to happen.
That's this first part. I've liked Adam for a while, but like he's really proving himself to me, and like especially how he comes through in the next chapter as well. Please don't do horrible things to Adam Blacklock, Dorothy Dunnett. I will not be happy with you.
I love this scene where he's like such a good hand-to-hand combat fighter because Lymond taught him to be, and it's like the men come at him and he's just like and like throws him over, and then at the end of that little bit the people at the tavern are all like, throw me you know, and there's this little like they all want him to sort of demonstrate his prowess in this, and it's like, oh, that's so neat.
There's a couple things I liked in this. One is there's a description of Lymond that I liked where it says he waited dry as ash with his peculiar bleached elegance that Adam had long since given up trying to capture. So we get not only a cool description of Lymond, but this idea of Adam as the artist, and like part of the reason Adam is there is to try to capture this unique quality that Lymond has that he, you know, so far has not been able to fully get because it's so unique and weird.
Yeah. Which is such a little, it's like a little commentary too on like the fan art. Like the fan art, like they try to capture Lymond, but like no one can ever quite get it.
Oh, I keep forgetting to show fan art. I'm gonna have to.
Oh yeah, we need to do a.
Yeah.
A session at the end where you just show all the fan art from this book, maybe.
Yeah.
There's also the whole thing where like Cormac has tears in his eyes and he's all like, how could you throw Una aside? And he's so angry at Lymond for like supposedly getting Una killed. You know, we're reminded that he beat her. And, you know, he would have actually murdered her if you remember in the previous book. So I like this, like he's worked himself up into this state of like outrage, like you stole my woman, in tears. And then Lymond kind of calls out at the end, like if he really cared about her and enough and he really wanted to kill me, he could have, but like he knows he didn't.
And he also replaced her with someone else.
The redhead.
Like, yeah, you don't really care.
Yeah. And I like also the way that Lymond kind of just like casually says this to Adam, like, if he really wanted to kill me, he could have. And Adam's like, wait, did you know that? You know, he could have just killed you? And Lymond's like, yeah.
Sure.
You don't know how close I came to killing him. And there's a couple things I like about this. One is Lymond really plays fast and loose with his own life, which we see again. Like he's just, if he dies, whatever. But also this like depth of emotion he has, that he's still super upset about Una and super angry at Cormac. And we're reminded how much he hides that, but how much it's going on underneath.
I was actually a little bit surprised with Cormac. I certainly don't like him, but I've always assumed he's kind of like this idiotic lout. But like the way he describes Una's death and like the way he throws that in Lymond's face, it's very poetic. Like just the way he says it. Like I wonder how long it took him to prepare those things. Like, he clearly just isn't saying that from nowhere. He has had this exact speech in mind for when he meets up with Lymond. It's almost like he's trying to clash wits with Lymond, which we know isn't going to end in a win for him. But
he's been wanting to confront Lymond about it for a while, clearly.
It sort of makes sense that he'd have this poetic spin, because he is this sort of charismatic leader of the Irish rebellion, kind of, sort of. Like, he's got to have something that people latch onto.
Yeah. And there's sort of a romantic tradition of storytelling and all of that, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly. So, it makes sense. I don't, this is me just being ignorant. I don't understand what exactly they're talking about. Like, obviously Lymond knows something that's compromising to Cormac because of the whole thing that Cormac and
it's the insurance scheme. So the Cormac and Thompson had a scheme where Thompson would, like, or some pirate, I don't know if, I can't remember if it was Thompson or someone Thompson knew, would like attack. Cormac would take out insurance on ship.
No, I remember. I remember that. I just don't know exactly how it fits in here. Like, obviously Lymond is using it to, like, give some info to Cormac and get info from Cormac or something.
Yeah. It's something like the Queen would be mad. And so, like, if you tell, he's hoping that his information on George Paris is going to get him in with the Queen, but this thing is, like, bad, so something like that. I don't know.
Well, we also know that Cormac is meeting with Gabriel secretly. We don't know it yet. We actually find that out next chapter, I think. But could Cormac be gathering information from Lymond to pass back to Gabriel, or is that too complicated for Cormac to do? I don't know.
I think Gabriel is definitely going to use Cormac as a catalyst to do something. Like, he wants him to call Lymond out in some way, or like he's going to cause some chaos that the Queen doesn't want to happen, or something like that. Like, he's using Cormac to do something. I think that we're going to see in the next chapter or two.
I mean, at this point, if any character just randomly mentions Gabriel, I immediately have my defenses up and I'm like, there's a plot. Gabriel has worked out something with them or has manipulated them in some way.
Yeah, for sure.
How did we think that Gabriel wasn't pure evil from the beginning of this book?
I mean,
you caught on to it quicker than I did.
Pretty suspicious immediately.
I know.
Like, I kept trying to tell myself maybe he's not. Like, that's the part I was like, okay, give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he's not. But I was like, he was so shady. Like, part of it was the way that he talked about God. That was just like, I don't know. It was just weird. There was this one prayer he gave that I thought that seemed really sincere and beautiful. And the rest of it was just like, I don't know. It's weird.
Do you think he's at all religious, or do you think he's using that as a front?
No, I think he's a sociopath.
Yeah, I mean, that's clear, but
yeah, I don't think he has any allegiance or honor to any entity outside of himself.
So then everything he does is just completely performative, because like, even when Adam Blacklock catches up with him later in this chapter, like, he goes away and Adam like catches him out of the corner of his eye, bringing out his little altar to pray to again.
The door is wide open.
Yeah, just
like, it's clearly he does it in front of the open door, and it's all about this performance of piety that is completely false. Yeah.
So
he's good.
Oh yeah, he's good.
He's good at covering his tracks.
Yeah.
So the first time I read it, like, I immediately didn't like him, but I didn't, even by this like third book, I didn't know if I should trust the writer or not. Like, I didn't know if her theme was going to be that Lymond needs to learn religious piety or something, you know?
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's why I kept going like, well, maybe he's good. Maybe he's going to be a mentor character. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I just made my skin crawl, but like, I still, really didn't know if he was good or bad, what I was supposed to think about him. And so when I got to these chapters where it's revealed that he's bad, I was so happy. Again, I was like jumping up and cheering. Like, yeah, I knew it.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I think about him, and I hope I have these words right, and I might have them wrong because I don't actually understand this mental health issues all that well. But I feel like he's not a psychopath, he's a sociopath, because he understands the emotions of others. Like, he's very, very intuitive and insightful because he's so good at manipulation. Like, it's not that he's unaware of how people, like, he knows his own emotions and he knows the emotions of others because he uses them to manipulate people. So yeah, but he just doesn't care about the consequences at all for anyone but him.
So one of the things that's super, super fun to do is to reread this book and see how he's manipulating things from the beginning. And like how every word he says to Lymond is like meant to cast these doubts on Lymond, to hurt his relationship with Jarrett, and like everything, even when it sounds like, I care so much about you, is like placing himself above and Lymond below, and creating this image of Lymond as this heathen and blasphemer, which he's not actually doing. Like, it's all manipulation from the start, and it's so insidious. And the thing is, like, I've known people like that, and I know how they work, and I know how hard it is to call them out, because when you call them out, you look like the crazy person. So it's just a fascinating study in how that works.
Yeah. And I really, one of the things I want to do rereading this book, because I'm definitely going to reread it, one of the things I want to do is try and figure out when exactly Lymond cottons on to Gabriel. Like, at what point does Lymond really figure it out? And I don't think I saw that reading it this time. In fact, I know I didn't. So I want to go and see if I can figure that out.
Well, this is jumping ahead to the next chapter, but I only want to say this one quick thing, is that they talked just about all of the things he did in Scotland, and then Nicholas de Nicolay tried to bring up some stuff from Malta, and Lymond was like, let's not deal with that yet. And I was like, no, let's deal with it. I want to know everything right now.
Yeah. Well, obviously he knew about it in Malta, because he does this whole, he talks about how what his deliberation was, should Graham join St. Mary's or should Graham not? And he clearly knew Graham was evil at that point, and he was trying to, like, what's the best outcome, or how can I avoid the worst outcome doing that? So clearly he figured it out in Malta.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think it's that letter that was in his pocket, which I think was orders from Dragoo Race, because we now know that he was working for him.
Right.
Yeah. Although he could have known before that too. He could have known going into Malta already. Like, this guy, I don't know how he would have, but.
Have we figured out the decision that Lymond made?
Not me.
Like, was it to let Graham into St. Mary's? Like, was that the decision?
It could be.
I think the decision was to fight Graham out. I think it was, this man is so evil, wherever he goes, he's going to cause suffering. So I have to protect the world from him. Which is a huge, momentous sacrifice of Lymond's own ambitions in favor of stopping this evil guy.
Yeah, and he could lose it all. I mean, as we see now, he's almost lost St. Mary's completely. So.
Yeah. Okay, chapter. Sorry.
Let's move on with the chapter. We can talk about Gabriel till the cows come home. So, so speaking of Gabriel, he shows up, and he's at this inn, and Gabriel has one last go at Lymond. Why don't you like me? Sort of is the term of this discussion. I wrote that at this point, without having read the next chapter yet, in my notes, I wrote, Adam has to know that Gabriel is a horrible person at this point, just by the way he reacts. We find out.
Both sarcastic here. It's so great.
Yeah. We find out. We find out some information that I didn't know. Maybe I just didn't catch it on the first read through. That after the incident at the Hot Trod, Gabriel was the one that ran to inform Grizel. And we see a little bit of flirtation here, which comes much more to light in the next chapter.
Did we know that before? I don't think we did.
I didn't think so. Okay, so it's not that I didn't catch it. It's just we're finding out now.
Because that would have been super suspicious. Like,
yeah. Well, it's almost like how, and again, this is something we learn next chapter, how he was the first person to tell Margaret Erskine when Tom died, even though everybody else was keeping it from her. And I thought something was fishy about that. And it turns out he did know. So. Yeah. And then my final note for this tiny little section is it all an act? And I'm not quite sure why I wrote that. So, but let's talk about it and see if I can figure out why.
Well, I had a couple of thoughts. Oh, there's so many things that Gabriel says in this scene that are just so gross. Like, just terrible. Like this bit about, you're looking well, I'm glad, thank God you're sleeping. And it's like, oh, like I firmly believe that he was deliberately manipulating Lymond's lack of sleep for that whole section and just causing all of the trivia that kept interrupting Lymond the whole time. Like, I totally think Graham was deliberately doing that, and that this is just this little like, thank God you're sleeping.
But also, it's so condescending, again, positioning himself as like a mentor figure, and Lymond is like this childlike, oh, you're sleeping, it's good,
Yeah.
you're making yourself sick, you know, you poor thing.
And then also, like,
well, just
you feel I'm a rival, Francis, but no, and you're just like, oh, it's so patronizing and gross.
Yeah, patronizing. And the way that he tries to explain, like, oh, the politics of the Queen Mother and like the relationship with France, and it's like, dude, he knows, we all know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, what the hell? He's way more plugged into it than you idiot. I love Lymond's response, which is like, I've heard a rumor or two to that effect. It's just like, yeah, he probably started the whole thing. I mean, just,
So I figured out why I wrote, is this an act? Because obviously Lymond has had Gabriel figured out. And obviously Gabriel knows a lot about Lymond. Is Gabriel aware of how much Lymond knows about Gabriel? And is this all just an act in front of Adam Blacklock?
I don't think he does, because I think he's too arrogant to believe that he's been found out by Lymond. Like, I think he thinks he's getting away with all of this. And I did have one question. I wondered if he's actually got a genuine question to Lymond at the bottom of 460, where he says, you are St. Mary's, you and no other. It sounds trite, but it's precisely true. I don't know your secret. There is no spiritual bond between you and your company, no common faith, no rights, no rules of chivalry. And those were all things that Gabriel had used to manipulate people around him, the rules of chivalry, the rights, etc. And so then he says, how is it done? And I was wondering, I think this is a real question on his part, that he doesn't understand how Lymond gets the loyalty of people, and he doesn't, because he's so manipulative, and he doesn't understand like genuine leadership. And yeah.
Well, and it would make sense because he's been so intense about wanting to get Lymond to his side. So like part of him probably is like, I could use this person. He has some skills that I don't. Like, we are quite complementary, even though he thinks himself superior, of course.
Yeah. And I do love this little bit where he says, Blacklock and I are quite convinced you have no designs on St. Mary's. It's just like, he's so sarcastic.
Oh yeah. And also earlier when Mallet says, thank God you are sleeping, and Lymond says, at the moment, I rather wish I were. But yeah, I do think it's an act, and like part of it, he's playing up this like, I don't give a crap about you, I'm so like blasé, so that Gabriel doesn't catch on that he knows. But also I think this whole thing is a performance for Adam, and if anything, they're both trying to get Adam over to their side.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, like they're not actually trying to convince each other.
Right.
Maybe Gabriel's trying to convince Lymond, maybe, but like Lymond doesn't expect he's going to be able to convince Gabriel. He's just wanting to convince Adam.
Right. I think Lymond is just trying to reveal to Adam Gabriel's perfidy, if we use that word.
It's such a good word.
I know.
And here's something else that I think I noticed this before, but now I'm really starting to pay attention to it, is Gabriel always makes sure he has an audience. Every single time. There's always a group of people around, or at least one other person when he has these discussions. There's never been just a Lymond and Gabriel conversation where nobody else is around, at least not that I recall.
Yeah. And Adam actually picks up on the fact that they're performing. Like, he literally says it. He says, Adam wondered suddenly if some part of this was intended for him. As in the other day when Lymond was saying all this stuff, but actually trying to communicate to Jarrett, and Jarrett was oblivious. And so it's a nice little thing about how like Adam's way more with it than Jarrett, because he's picking all this up.
So speaking of Jarrett not being with it, there's also a great exchange that like says in the text exactly what you've been saying all along, which is where Lymond asked Gabriel, who is more important to Jarrett Blythe, you or Christ?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have that one written down too.
Yep. Yeah, I put a couple exclamation points next to that. Yes.
And then again, like, I think you said this earlier too, where Gabriel keeps trying to use like, I am associated with the church and the church is holy and God and Jesus and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And Lymond keeps pointing out like, yes, but the religion is led by humans and humans are fallible too. Yeah. So you don't get a pass for everything you do just because religion, you are also a human being.
Right. Exactly. It's like, and the bit about, like Lymond like sees so clearly that I mean, he's very humanist, but I don't get a sense that he's actually an atheist. Like, I think he just has a very clear view of the fallibility of the church, and that the constructions of religion are, for the most part, constructed by fallible people who are at times malicious and use that construction and use those institutions for their own ends. And like Lymond sees that very clearly, and it doesn't. So yeah, like if Min's faith in Gabriel were shaken, he says blandly. I think anytime he says anything blandly, it's clearly important. Like he definitely means it. Blandly, smiling a little, would men follow an abstract faith into battle so readily? So it's like, it's not God they're following, it's you. And yeah. And I thought it was interesting that after that, Gabriel said strange showing for the first time in the beautiful voice. So like that gets to him.
But it's also like, does it really get to him, or is even that just part of the performance for Adam? Like this man is hurting my poor precious self because I'm trying so hard to make him good.
Maybe, but I kind of took it as he's annoyed that he's being called out on his shit. Like, and that's what's causing that strain, is that like he keeps kind of trying to get his, like, no, it's all about God, it's all about Christ, I was like, no. And he's just super annoyed that it's not working, and it's not working in front of an audience, like you said, Philippe. Yeah.
I mean, you definitely get the sense that this is the first time in Gabriel's life, just like it's the first time in Jolita's life, that they haven't been able to convert someone. Like, why is he immune?
Yeah. And they haven't been able to do it easily, is the sense that you get. Like, it's that before this, like everything just worked for both of them. And then nothing is working.
Yeah, they finally met their match.
Yeah. And then we get this lovely bit with Grizel.
Oh, yeah.
Where she's just so eminently practical about her marriage to Will. And I just kind of love that scene, even though it's sad and like there's definitely grief for Will under the surface of this. But she's basically like, damn it, I just gotten him to where I wanted him to be. And then he dies. But this whole, and just this idea that like she wasn't really expecting her marriage to last a long time because their life is so violent, and she just assumed that Will was going to die at some point, and so that's the way life is. And it's just like, oh, it's so sad.
It's very true to the like kind of Bookaloo type characters, and very practical, as you said, but there's definitely that emotion underneath, especially the last line, and he had been an uncommonly dear lad. So it's like, it's not that she doesn't care, she does.
Yeah, she cares, but she also, and it was just like this, it's like she had hope that this would last because he was a really good guy, and it didn't. And it's like, oh, well, it's not surprising that it didn't. But
and she's ready to move, like she's going to move on, because like what other choice does she have? She's sort of been like, she I guess went into it with that expectation anyway. So.
Yeah. And you get the sense that this, I mean, Bacloo's on his third wife, and Janet was married before she married him, right?
I don't remember.
I think she might have had at least
one. Was.
Yeah, she had at least one husband before Will. So you just get this sense of like spouses just die, and you marry the next person who can give you, who can be a little secure and protect your family. And if you have kids, like, are they going to protect the kids? And so you can see why Gabriel is a very attractive possibility for her, because she has young kids and he seems super competent,
and also he apparently looks like God, according to Jenny. So he's a very attractive man on top of it all.
Who does like slightly redeem herself in the next chapter.
The next chapter.
I love her in the next chapter. It's just like she's so true to her character, but also just like, okay.
Well, she kind of like zones out for part of it, but then when they start talking about how Jolita has had sex before, she's suddenly like super interested.
She's like totally into the gossip about Jolita.
Yeah.
Okay, we still haven't got that. That chapter, man, we got to talk about it.
Ooh, that's going to be a good one.
Yeah.
All right, so we done with this section? What's the next section?
Yeah, next section is the trial. So Lymond goes to meet the queen. Let me get my notes. The Queen Dowager, sorry. Margaret Erskine is there. So basically, long story short, the queen has sort of had these whisperings in her ear from Gabriel and also the French ambassador Wissel, who has also been with Gabriel a lot.
Who I think is just secondhand Gabriel.
Yeah, basically. Right. That Lymond is unfit, so she wants to disband his army. She has a laundry list of everything that's gone wrong, and of course, everything that's gone wrong can be traced back to Gabriel interfering with things. Margaret actually defies the queen and ends up trying to speak for Lymond, but it's really not going well for Lymond at all. And she's saying, you have to disband the army. That's the only choice. And then, of course, the OG white savior himself, Gabriel, shows up and tries to redeem everything by sort of saying, but we have this other plan worked out where if you pledge your army to the queen, she's going to send you to France to this campaign. And then if you do really well, you can maintain the leadership, because I certainly don't want it. I've been offered to depose you and take the army for myself, but I just said no to that person because that's just not who I am. Sure.
Right. I would never.
No. There's some more intricacies in the trial we'll get into. After the trial, Lymond actually agrees to things because I think he has no other choice, and he knows it at this point. We learn that the group that he sent to Thompson to sort of do some naval exercises had some awful thing happen to them where another pirate attacked, and that's the last straw. The queen said, no brawling, no bloodshed until you go. And of course, even before that happened, something has already occurred that she doesn't know about yet. So now it's sort of a race to get some things accomplished before the queen learns about what happened on this naval exercise. So Lymond sends Adam back to St. Mary's, and they start discussing the Jolita night. We find out that Adam and Lymond both realized that Jolita was already pregnant when she showed up for that night, that she's about 5 months pregnant, and that right at the end of this chapter, Lymond reveals that he's going to have a gathering at Bog Hall Castle to discuss the perfidy of Graham Reed Mallet. I almost said George. I don't know why. Yeah. So some interesting tidbits and really some build up to next chapter, which is where I think our main discussion of this section is going to be.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of an ominous bit in the middle where that Cormac O'Connor has met with Gabriel and Lymond doesn't know that has happened. So that's a little bit like, ooh.
Yeah, so he's not catching everything.
We're also reminded again, the bottom of 465, that the only person who consistently had championed Lymond had been Graham Reed Mallet, which is a great way to like sort of make yourself immune from accusation of trying to depose someone by being like, I'm their greatest champion. And then if they say that guy's messing with me, then they look crazy and they look ungrateful, right? He's so devious.
Yeah. but people don't think about like, well, what is his champion this consist of? You know, was it like, oh, he's such a weak character, but we have to really support him, you know, like he could do better. I think he could, you know, like that kind of thing. And where, you know, like, oh, yes, he drinks all the time, but, you know, he's brilliant. So, you know, like, oh, yeah.
He's a blasphemous heathen, but
But, you know, we could redeem him maybe, and I could do it, you know, like.
There's also a line in here that Richard and Adam had both agreed to, which is that Lymond is afraid of Gabriel. And this is said as a bad thing, like about Lymond, but I think it's actually true. I think it's just a fact. Like Lymond would not have had that gathering at Bog Hall to try to get all these people on board if he wasn't afraid of Gabriel.
Yeah, like Gabriel's a threat. And which I think goes back to our thing from Queen's Play where we want there to be a competent villain, you know, and he's a competent villain. Like he's good at what he's doing, and he's a master manipulator, and there's a chance that he could win. Like there was no chance that Diabni, I finally remembered his name, that there was no chance that Diabni was going to win in Queen's Play, like none, you know. But even with this plan of the 10 people around the table at the end of the next chapter, like we could still end this book on a cliffhanger with Lymond exiled and Graham winning. Like that's a reasonable thing that could happen because of the way that this character is written. So yeah.
You guys have no idea how hard it was for me to keep a straight face when you were like, we want a competent villain.
Like, you're gonna get one. Just wait for Gabriel.
Yeah, in the contrast of these two villains is actually quite nice. Like the contrast between Queen's Play and the Disorderly Knights is a good.
They're both kind of over the top, but competent versus incompetent.
Yeah, ridiculous versus genuinely frightening.
Yeah. So also, and Lymond is he's at least a step ahead here where Gabriel comes in and offers this alternate plan, and Lymond's like, pretty sure the Queen Dowager was about to offer that plan herself, and you just swooped in to be the savior, unnecessarily to claim the credit.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think Lymond knew much of what was going to be happening at this meeting beforehand. We learned earlier in this chapter that sort of at the end, he was talking to a lot of people that knew the situation to get to information. So none of this is a surprise to him.
No, and it's like, if he could just be present for things, he would be able to, fix them. Like if he was just there, like Gabriel wouldn't have been able to do a lot of this stuff, I don't think. But because so much, you know, he can only be in one place at one time, so all of these manipulations happened, and then ideas are set in people's minds, and now he has to like dig himself. He has to dig his reputation out of all of these people's minds, and that's hard. So,
yeah. I wonder if it would have been different if he'd been able to confide in people earlier and wasn't trying to do everything on his own. But then again, maybe people would not have believed him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I do think, and I've said this before, that like one of his major weaknesses is very understandably based on his past, but is a reluctance to confide in people. And so that's why I loved the next chapter so much, because I was like, yes, he's bringing people in and he's explaining things. Like, yay.
It's one of his greatest fears. He's so tense during the whole thing, and you have that moment afterward where his knuckles are white holding onto the window, and you realize how much it took out of him to come, bear all this stuff to all these people.
Yeah. And he does it in he's like, they're probably not going to believe me, and lays out like why they won't believe him at the very beginning, which is just
no. And I mean, he totally thinks that they're not going to believe him and that he's going to die, and then when he dies, then they'll realize it was true. So he's actually surprised when anyone agrees.
Yeah
I'm a little surprised that he didn't at least confide in Sibylla. I mean, I know he was being kept away from Mid-Culture because of what happened with Jolita, but even she's taken aback and like, why can't you just tell me things? So, sorry.
I think maybe part of him is just terrified that she wouldn't believe him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or it could be too, like that one comment that she made about why didn't you just tell me now, like before the Bog Hall meeting? It could just be that it would have taken a really long time and like he just needs to tell everybody all at once.
Yeah, well, I think he was waiting till he could kind of gather his evidence and lay it out as convincingly as possible.
Yeah, and he needed like Adam and Nicholas and
right,
all those guys there.
Yeah,
it's true. Maybe he was just waiting with the group, because if he can show everybody that he can convince Sibylla, so it's just one more person coming over to his side. Although it wouldn't take much to convince her, I think. I
don't think that's very convincing because she's on his side. But one thing about the group is like everybody had little pieces of information. Like Lymond had the whole picture, but everybody in that room had bits of the picture. They just didn't realize they had bits of the picture until he brought it all together. So that was probably, that's one of the reasons why it needed to be everybody in the room and not just trying to explain to one person at a time.
Yeah. So going back to the previous chapter before we get too into that, and about
we just can't stay away from that.
I know we're going to talk about the meeting at Bog Hall.
We're almost there, but I had a couple other comments. One of them, just going back to the competence of Gabriel, is when Lymond talks to Adam, he says, it really is exceedingly neat. And it's like he's put together what Gabriel's doing. And even though he's afraid of Gabriel, like he also, just on an intellectual level, is like, damn, this guy's good.
Yeah.
And that's what makes him scary.
It's kind of a reflection of his laughter at Watt Scott, although like he laughs at Watt Scott getting the best of him because I think he genuinely does like respect Watt Scott, even though he's kind of an idiot in some of the ways he does things. Like Lymond likes him and respects him and knows that he isn't at heart malicious. So when he gets the better of Lymond laughs about it. But here he still has that like, oh, this is a good plan, like he still has that little bit of admiration, but it's frightening instead of funny. So.
Also in this section, we didn't really talk about much, but the revelation is not only that Jolita had been pregnant before, but that Jolita had a baby before. Where's that baby, you guys?
Oh, I'm still going with my theory. I still think it might be.
I have a question for you guys, and please excuse my naivete in this. Is there, other than possibly having a C-section scar, is there any way that they both could have looked at her and known, well, not only are you pregnant now, but we also can clearly tell you've already had a baby?
Yeah, there's signs on your body after you have a baby. Not everybody has them, but some women do. Like your stomach will show and your breast will show, and like there can be signs. Like you can have stretch marks that are indicative of having been pregnant.
Okay.
Like that. So.
Because that's what I was wondering, how they both were able to tell. Because I know she was naked in that scene. So
yeah, especially if she was naked. Like they're yeah, it's possible. Like, because women complain about it all the time after like my body, I had a kid and my body changed. Like I couldn't get my pre-pregnancy body back. Like that's a common complaint of women. So yeah.
But again, then if she already actually had a baby, where's the baby?
So on Malta? Or
did she have a baby?
Okay, so if the baby is Gabriel's, but and we get this revelation in the next chapter that he was working for Dragut, that was the thing that shocked me, by the way, that I didn't realize he had gone that far. Then was the baby smuggled out of Malta and is with the Saracens, or the Turks? Is there like a wet nurse somewhere taking care of this baby? So
we don't know for sure, but keep it in your mind.
There is another baby. And was this the baby did you have this baby on the ship? Is that what the secret was?
No, because then there'd be a baby.
Well, unless they spirited it away somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't know. But she has had a baby in the past. Okay, I also have to ask another question. Do we have any proof other than just what they say that is it possible that Gabriel and Jolita are not actually siblings and that he's just a part of she's just a part of his long con and that he like picked her up when she was a real young child
that looks a lot like him.
Yeah.
It's
because that makes
really similar though.
If he is the father of her child, that makes things a little less icky if they're not actually related. But I don't know.
Yeah. Do we want it to be less icky though? Here's a question. Like, do we want him to be like, do we want him to be just like this super, super villain, like evil character? And this makes him way more evil. Like, because if he's like, there's such a taboo about this across cultures. So like, if he is this guy who did like, he's so evil, and like, does that make him more interesting as a character or less interesting as a character? And I mean, if she's had a baby and has had enough time to recover to be pregnant again, and she's 16, like, when did she start having sex? Like at 12 or 13? Like, it's young, and that just adds a level of like horrific trauma to all of this. And
this is really minor and it doesn't really matter in the long run, but she was 16 when she first arrived in Scotland, so she's got to be at least 17 by now, right?
She's been there a year, because they said it, I think at Dumbarton, that she was still 16. So we don't know when her birthday is, but like she must have arrived as a young 16 in order to still be 16.
I thought that she'd been in Scotland for at least a year at this point, but I guess not.
I don't think so.
It really doesn't matter in the long run. It's just something I was wondering about.
But I mean, it is interesting. Like, we keep getting all these references to her as a child, and she's wearing these childlike clothes and stuff. And like, there's definitely this effort to make her seem younger than she is, so that it's more, you know, blasphemous and awful that she's been debauched.
There is actually another facet to this, which could be maybe she's not 16. Like, maybe how do we know how old she is? Just because Gabriel said so or she said so. Like, if she's dressing, if they're trying to dress her like super young, like maybe she's 19 or 20 and is just faking being so young. Like, I don't think there's any evidence for that. At least I haven't seen any, but like,
yeah. And there's so much made about her like youthful faith.
Yeah,
that's kind of hard to fake.
Yeah, that's true.
There's also a bit I like in here where Lymond says she has the mind and morals of a jungle cat. She didn't enjoy meeting another of the same. Is he really the same though? Does he think he is?
He thinks he is. I think it just goes back to his self-perception. Like, there's a line later too where he says something about how his only good trait, or his only something, is that he's persistent. And I'm like, and you just want to go, no, that's not your only thing. Like, you're so much more than that. So
our boy has some self-esteem problems. Also interesting in this section is he says the ultimate choice is not going to be the Queen Dowagers in terms of whether Gabriel wins or Lymond. It's going to be St. Mary's. Why does he say that?
I mean, the men will follow or not follow based on like their perception of good leadership. And the Queen can order, the Queen can order them to be disbanded, but they can stick together and go somewhere else. Or the Queen can order them to stay together and they can refuse to fight and leave. So.
Yep. And then he says at the end, St. Mary's was never an army, only a battlefield. What does he mean by that?
Because the whole thing where he was training at St. Mary's has turned into a battle of wits between him and Gabriel, where
But not only that it turned into that, but it sort of implies that he created it for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was always planning to do St. Mary's, I think, but like when he made that decision in Tripoli, which is to fight Gabriel, was this part of his plan? He's like, I know Gabriel eventually is going to come and try and join this and take this away from me. So let's set the stage.
Yeah, this comment at the end of this chapter definitely corroborates your idea, Laura, that that decision was to fight Gabriel, and that he sort of designed this whole thing to be attractive to Gabriel, to get Gabriel to come and have this sort of battlefield.
Yeah, because basically he would have done it some other way, and Lymond would have been further away, and it would have been harder to stop him. So at least he puts himself at the center of it and tries to set it up in a way where he can see what Gabriel's doing and intervene.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we have this reminder of that moment in the tent where he says that he learned something in Malta: never mind their eyes, watch their hands.
Mm-hmm.
So he's been able to figure all this out by watching what Gabriel does. Makes sense.
True.
And that was advice from Dragut, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love how Dragut like plays both sides. Like Gabriel's working with him, but like he likes Lymond and he's helping him out and giving him some advice.
Yeah. I mean, probably you kind of have to wonder, like, maybe he doesn't really care what's happening in Scotland. Like, he doesn't have a huge investment in that part of the world. So he's sort of like, because it doesn't matter to him at all, he's sort of like, hey, I'm going to give you a little warning because this is, yeah.
All right, ready to move on?
Shall we do the next chapter? Chapter 13, The axe is turned on itself. So in this beginning section, we go to mid-culture. Sibylla is talking to Richard, and Sibylla is just done with Jolita's shit. She's like, if she comes downstairs and asks for one more liver pate or almond milk. Yeah. And of course, Richard is solely on Jolita's side because she is beautiful and pure and chaste. And yeah, it's just a quick little conversation between Richard and Sibylla. And I love how at the end he asks her this question: if he walked in just now and asked Jolita to marry him, what would you do? Faint, said Sibylla simply.
Yeah, that was so good.
I also love on the bottom of page 475. She's getting on your nerves, said Richard perceptively. This is sarcasm, I hope. I hope this is Dorothy Dunnett being sarcastic about. Yeah.
This is like when Jarrett thinks about how he has no weaknesses.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, really, Richard, what clued you into that fact?
Well, I also love this description of Sibylla in the first paragraph: swirling furiously among the stairs and corridors of her exquisite home like a small and angry white bat.
Also, she was not above spitting at her unfortunate son. Like, you can just see her being so annoyed. But
we also have a little bit of foreshadowing of Richard like getting over his hatred of Lymond by saying, like, look, it is just possible to understand what happened with Lymond and Jolita. And then they have that exchange about Lymond needing a master. And even Sibylla agrees that's the trouble, isn't it? That he doesn't have a master. And then Richard saying he found one, but he cannot acknowledge it. And I think the interesting bit there is he found a master in the sense of he found someone who is as good as and maybe better than him, but it's a supervillain, not a mentor.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I also think that Jolita and Richard mean different things by this. Like, Richard means someone needs to control Lymond. Like, he needs to be under someone's authority and be controlled by them. And I think Sibylla means Lymond's needed a father figure his whole life and has never had one. And that, like, I think Sibylla's idea of what a master would be to Lymond is someone who would teach him and help him and support him, and, because he's young. We keep missing that. And Richard thinks somebody needs to control my brother. And I think those are different.
Yeah, for sure. Richard has such a immature idea of who Lymond is, and Sibylla has a much greater understanding.
And I think Sibylla has just such a better understanding of what motivates both of her sons, and she, like, there's no way she was ignorant to the way that Gavin was playing them both and all of that. So yeah. Anyway.
All right. Anything else about this tiny little bit, or moving on? Moving on. All right. So Lymond arrives at Midcoulter to face Jolita, who is very pregnant at this point. He has a meeting with Jolita, Richard, Sibylla, and Madame Donati is there. Madame Donati throws out my newest favorite insult ever, which is misbegot hog. I think I will call people that exclusively in the future. There's a moment where Sibylla is so angry with Lymond that she actually calls him Lymond instead of Francis, which is something I don't think we've seen yet. Jolita keeps begging to be married. They leave, and Lymond apologizes to Richard. And at the end, after discussing some of the things that Jolita has done, some of the awful things Jolita has done while living at Midcoulter, Sibylla agrees to come to Bog Hall the next day, and she will bring Richard with her, even if she has to force him to go. But we can see that after this meeting that Sibylla is visibly shaken by it.
Well, Lymond is on his very worst, most offensive behavior in this scene intentionally.
Yes.
But nonetheless, horrifyingly.
Well, he had to show Jolita that, so she doesn't report back to Gabriel. So.
Yeah. And I think Sibylla is angry because, like, later she's angry because if she had been in on the scene, like, she still could have played it exactly the same. Like, she's smart enough and is able to dissemble enough that she could have done it. Richard, of course, couldn't have. But and she's mad, like, why didn't you tell me? But also, I feel like, when would he have told her? Like,
Well, there was that one moment he came back when her cat died, which now we know how her cat died.
Yeah.
I didn't even catch on that the first time when she mentioned it.
Didn't they tell us?
Thought in my head.
They
told us that the cat died, but I should know better at this point that Dorothy Dunnett just doesn't write things to have them happen. Like, there's always a reason. So
yeah,
I totally thought she implied that Jolita killed the cat back then.
Oh, I didn't catch that at all.
Yeah, how?
I can't remember, but I thought it did, because I think they were talking about Jolita or something, and then I assumed Jolita killed the cat. I think maybe it was just juxtaposed with news about her or something, and yeah, because she's so evil. It's like one of those classic, what's the serial killer do when they're a kid? They kill animals, So as soon as the cat died, I was like, oh yeah, that was this horrible person did it.
So, knowing that information now, and hearing how she shot that guy's horse because he laughed at her and it wasn't just an accident, I went back and reread that section, and I can now safely predict that I think Jolita killed Trotty Lockup.
Oh, I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
That she killed her and then just stuck around and like
tried to blame it on someone else.
Came up. Yeah, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah,
because and she was trying to kill her before she said anything about the secret.
I was too caught up in trying to think that it was Gabriel and that Gabriel had sent an agent to do it. And going back and rereading it again, it's just obvious, knowing what we know now. So one of the mysteries is solved.
I agree with you. Yeah, it was her. Like, otherwise, why was she there? Like,
Why would she have been outside at night of Midcoulter? There's no other reason.
Now, here's the question: did Lymond know she did it immediately?
That I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either.
I don't think he would have inferred that, because he doesn't know that Trotty Lockup had a secret that she told to Tom Erskine. He still, and I think
he thinks it's the George Paris thing, right?
He thinks that Richard is trying to kill Philippa because of the George Paris information. I don't think he knows about the secret.
That what?
You said Richard is trying to kill Philippa.
Oh,
Gabriel's trying to kill Philippa.
Sorry.
Richard is not trying to kill Philippa.
That would be a twist.
The secret twist. It's been Richard the whole time.
Oh, I hope not.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just thought that was fun.
No, it's fine. We all have our mistakes. So
yeah.
So I was thinking when you were talking earlier about how Lymond could have told Sibylla and saved her a lot of angst that this was all an act. I was thinking about Kate's line in the previous section where Kate says he tolerates his enemies and plays merry hell with his friends. That's what he's doing here. Like, dude, you could have told your mother and saved her a lot of grief.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, just pulled her aside. Even if he had just like winked at her at the beginning of the scene, like he could have totally clued her into the fact that he was faking without even saying anything, actually, and she would have picked it up. But
there's also in this bit, it's on 477, a good example of the way that we are led to think of Jolita as a child, even though she's old enough at this point to be married in this culture. In the end, Madame Donati brought the child down, and so like even the narrator is complicit in like she's a child, and then she's wearing a white childish dress.
mm-hmm.
So like she's totally playing up that child thing, and then also just a reminder of her silk apricot hair. Keep that apricot motif in mind in relation to Jolita.
She's poisonous. Or no, there's a peach that's poisonous.
Apricots too.
I mean, maybe it's the poison, but maybe it's also the like ripe fruit of youth, and like she's clad in white, so she's like virginal and innocent, but she's also this like ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. Like this whole motif of her is so gross.
I have a question also about Madame Donati, because isn't her whole job to keep Jolita virginal? And she's clearly been failing in this job, like to an incredible extent. Jolita's always going off by herself places, like what the hell? So then my question becomes, is Madame Donati dumb? Like just super dumb? Is she like in the pay of Jolita and Gabriel to allow, like just to give the appearance of her having a chaperone, but she doesn't actually have one, just a woman who like goes around with her? If that's the case, why is she so angry all the time about, like, she gets so passionately angry about defending Jolita's honor, you know? And is that all, like, is she being paid to have this act? Is there something else going on? Like, you know, like she just seems so bizarrely in the scenes in ways that you wouldn't think like a sort of lady's maid / chaperone / governess or whatever she's supposed to be is. Yeah,
I think she has to be in on it, and I think that you're on the ball when you say it's a money thing that she's getting paid well, because we see what an opportunist she is when she finds out that one miserable Scottish man has a lot of money, or so she thinks. Like she immediately starts trying to woo him, and she still I think doesn't know that he's not actually rich, that it's just sort of this practical joke that's being played on her.
I wonder if she's like part of the Gabriel Jolita scheme in some way. Like, is she's connected in some way, or if she's just like a paid assistant to Jolita or something. But it just defies believability that she's a genuine duenna. I don't know how to say that word, but that she's a genuine chaperone and that Jolita just keeps pulling one over on her all the time. Like that just kind of defies belief. Like surely there's something else going on.
Well, she was involved when she got sick on the ship, so she has to know what's been going on there. She's the one that called Patty Lockup in. Yeah. There's no way that she doesn't know that she's had a baby before and that she was pregnant before she ran off to meet with Lymond. So while maybe she didn't know that specific thing was happening, like, wouldn't she have lost her mind when her ward disappeared for a whole night? It's like, oh, Jolita's gone again. And she's not back.
Again. Yeah.
Like, she's a part of it.
Wander off to this time. Like,
there's no way that she's an unwilling conspirator in this.
Yeah, so. I agree. I mean, it's maybe not a very big plot point, but it's super weird.
And if she does have no idea, I'll be very surprised. And then she's very negligent and
dumb and
not
and
chaperone at all.
maybe Jolita's drugging her all the time or something.
I mean, who knows? This is Jolita we're talking about.
Who knows?
Anyway. This is a great aside. I like it. Also, there's a moment in here that I find absolutely hilarious where Lymond says something horribly gross about Jolita's large belly, and Richard goes to hit him, and it says, Lymond, who after all had more warning than anyone, ducked expertly and ran instead with a stinging smack into the flat of Evangelista Donati's hand. Which just cracks me up so much. Like, he had more warning than anyone because he knew he was going to say this horrible thing. He says it, knows his brother's going to hit him, ducks out of the way, is not expecting Madame Donati there.
Yeah. And
kind of like, honestly, he kind of deserves that slap. I enjoyed him getting slapped there.
I mean, he's being horrible. Like, he's being horrible for a purpose, but that doesn't change the fact that he's being genuinely horrible.
I still think he should not have slept with Jolita. That's a terrible thing to do. She's 16. Yeah. Like, what the hell, man?
Yeah.
I know he's wrong, but still.
And it doesn't, it kind of like, yes, he was being like deeply manipulated by people into doing this thing, but he still made the choice to do it.
Yeah. And then he says later, like, I was going to see if I could convert her. And it's like, stop trying to win people over with sex. It's so weird. Your about sex are so weird, Lymond.
Yeah, don't do that.
I was really unhappy with his how he says, like, well, my reputation was scarred the second she moved into the inn, so I figured I might as well do it because damn, she deserved it. And I was like, ew, Lymond, really? Come on, be better than that.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not completely faultless, and this is the biggest fault.
No, and he hates Gabriel so much, and he does take it out on Jolita. Like, okay, he doesn't like her too. She's pretty awful, but she's 16, and whatever happens, and he knows, like, she was raised with Gabriel. Like, it's not her fault that she's such a mess. Yeah. It doesn't excuse her, but
that she leaves a mark on the people she sleeps with, like a cross with a piece of glass or a dagger. I was like, really?
Ew. Yeah.
What's that all about?
Like, also, like, the ghost check the grooms thing, like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
All right, we're getting closer to the trial, so let's keep moving on.
Okay. Well, so,
or if you have something else, please. If you have something else.
Yeah. So, right before the revelation that she signs her work, she's grabbed a vase and she's about to hit him again. And that's what he says, you don't sign your work twice. Does that mean she signed her work once?
Yeah, I think she scarred him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
definitely.
I also like that after this whole scene, he apologizes to Richard and Sibylla, at least. And he gives a reminder that my trade calls for acting. So, like, again, like, keep it in mind, because you don't always get this explanation right afterward, but in so many Lymond scenes, he is acting, and, like, you can't take anything he says or does at face value, really.
Mm-mm.
What else? Oh, I just love the line about how Sibylla was going to go along with the marriage for, like, propriety's sake, and then the whole time wondering if she was going to have to spend all her life training her daughter-in-law not to kill cats.
Oh, that just seems like a complete disaster.
Disaster averted. He's not going to marry her.
Yeah.
And, like, what possibly could she have done with Kevin if she had been left alone with him even longer? Thank God Margaret Erskine put a stop to that. But
yeah.
Why would Sibylla have done that in the first place, left her alone with her? I guess in the beginning, Sibylla didn't know right away.
Yeah, I assume that Margaret found out, told Sibylla, and after that, they never let her near Kevin again.
Right.
Alone.
Which is interesting to me that Margaret, like, I do think we see in these two chapters some of Margaret, like, she's insightful about people. But there was a scene, and I didn't mention it before, but there's a scene in the bit in the trial where the Queen's trial where Margaret makes a comment about Gabriel, and it's like, thank God he's like this or something, like, and it's clear that she does not see his evil nature. Like Margaret doesn't have a clue at that point, and she's going to figure it out in the next chapter, obviously. But I think that's just another sign about how good Gabriel is, because even someone who has shown over and over that she really does have a good, she can see through people, even Lymond, like she can kind of see through Lymond sometimes. She's totally snowed by Gabriel.
Similarly to one of the great red herrings of the book is that Una, who is super perceptive and smart, doesn't see through Gabriel and actually like really sees him as a caring, good person who's good to her. And so I think we often, like the reader gets thrown off Gabriel's scent because Una thinks so highly of him. And we know Una's very suspicious of people and not likely to, you know, think highly of someone without a good reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Poor Una.
Yeah.
All right, should we move on to the next bit? A brief section here.
Sure. So Gabriel returns from Falkland to St. Mary's. Jarrett's there. And he talks about Jolita, and Jarrett says, "Oh, I'll go get her for you." And of course, Gabriel says, "No, we mustn't." But really, he's starting the end game, because as soon as he sees Jolita, he'll know that she's pregnant, and then he can levy the charges against Lymond. So he's setting into motion the final part of his plan here. So we know
also,
that
I think
timing is short.
Right. And I think we find out here as well that Gabriel is the reason that the whole pirate thing happened with the boat with Thompson, because it says if the Irish hadn't surrounded them, like they would have gotten away without fighting at all, which would have been the ideal outcome. But I think it's clear that Cormac is the one who's behind the whole disaster with the pirate thing. So Gabriel is behind it. Ultimately. Yeah.
Makes sense. Yep. You said exactly what I took away from this as well. It's just how expertly Gabriel manipulates Jarrett. Like, I miss my sister. Oh, I'll go get her. Oh no, don't go get her. But like, oh, thank you for getting her.
She's the light of my life, and I'm just like, bleh.
I'm really terribly interested to see which way Jarrett will go when he's presented with this information, because I have no idea which way he's going to choose yet. I want him to stick with Lymond. I want him to realize the error of his ways, but it could go either way.
I really do think that if he gets some sort of concrete proof that Gabriel is evil, that he will believe it.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't even imagine the amount of proof it's going to take, because he's such an idiot. Like he's such a moron when it comes to this guy, that it's going to have to be some sort of major shock, which, I mean, I kind of, again, with the whole cruddy incest thing, but if there's some sort of, like, if he finds out that Gabriel has slept with Jolita, like that would be a shock. Like that would be, I feel like that would be enough to shock him out of his, because I feel like all the stuff that Gabriel does against Lymond, he can just kind of like justify it with like, well, he has a higher intent, or he was doing it for a good cause, or, you know, St. Mary's is better in his hands, so anything ultimately heading that direction is fine, you know. And I feel like he would just justify it. But like that thing would be so taboo and so gross that I don't know.
Agreed.
The way that he behaves, I can't imagine much like he just keeps justifying everything so much. Like he should have figured this out 6 months ago. And
I mean, it's possible that he learned some of it in this book, but the decision isn't made yet, and then at some point in the future he'll realize again, it's like, oh shit, now Gabriel's doing even worse stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Because there's not much left of this book yet, and there's an awful lot left to do if Gabriel's going to pay for his crimes at the end of this. So
yeah.
I don't know if that's going to happen.
For his crimes. I think he's going to get away.
Yeah.
Like, I think this book is going to end with Lymond victorious-ish, but I think Gabriel's going to get away mainly because I want him to, because I want him to be the villain in the next book. So,
I don't want to lose such a good villain yet. So
yeah. Like I don't want him to be like a one book guy. So, so yeah, I think he's going to get away.
Is there anything else in this little bit? because we have 2 more small bits to go, and then we get to the meat of this chapter. So the Bog Hall meeting starts. We learn who's gathered. He's gathered 10 people at the table. And at the end, he says that here for the purpose of destroying Sir Graham Reed Mallet.
You're just like, oh, yay. I was like, oh, this is going to be good.
I love that Nicholas de Nicolay is there, because he's sort of like the one person that is completely unbiased towards all of it. So he's not one of the St. Mary's. He's not one of the women who are apparently going to be easily swayed towards Gabriel's side.
I also really I want Salablanca to be more of this story. I want him to play a little bit more of a role. Like, I feel like he's always there. He's always in the background, and he's just kind of this like quiet figure in the background. And I really want him to be a bigger part of the story.
I do as well. I just feel like he wasn't necessarily needed for this meeting because he already knows and implicitly trusts Lymond.
But I feel like he knows so much. Like he can really be, whether he's trusted as a witness or not is another situation in this particular.
Archie and Salalanca are out as witnesses because they're obviously loyal to Lymond.
Yeah, it's another reason why Archie wasn't really a big part of this meeting. He was there, but like he wasn't really allowed. Even when the one point where he tries to speak up for Lymond, Lymond's like, no, you can't. They won't.
They're not going to trust you.
Not going to mean as much from you. So
I do agree with you guys on wanting more Salablanca. He's such an interesting character, and we get it.
Yeah, so interesting.
So before we can start the actual meat of this, we have to do one little last thing. So we go to Fall Valleys, where Kate sort of hears a rumor that Lymond is going to marry Jolita because he has gotten her pregnant, and she tells Philippa, who is devastated by this news.
I don't think, did Kate hear? I think Kate just heard the rumor they were going to get married, because Kate like confronts Philippa when Philippa says, like, he has to marry her, and Kate's like, why do you say that?
Why do you say he has to marry her?
Yeah, isn't it Lymond you pity? Yeah, and like, no, they deserve each other. So I think this is where we get the clue that the secret she knows is about Jolita being pregnant, and because she's like, he has to marry her.
Right, and we know how much she hates Lymond, so why should she be feeling bad for Lymond having to marry Jolita?
Yeah. So.
I also just love Kate's thought of a wedding gift, something tasteful with poison in it, perhaps.
Yeah, she's not happy.
Understandably.
Well, I mean, Kate knows Jolita's rotten, I think. So.
Not only that, but Kate has got this big crush on Lymond, and he's going to marry this 16-year-old, beautiful girl. Like, damn.
Sucks. And then Philippa
disappears,
runs away.
At least she takes a servant with her, a bodyguard.
With her.
Cheese Wame Henderson. That's an interesting name. So I guess that's his position. He's the cheese Wame. I don't know what a cheese Wame is.
The Wame is like your belly, so he's got like a cheese belly. Like I guess he's got like a belly. He eats lots of cheese.
Okay. Cheese Wame.
And of course, there's been sort of a guy camped outside of their castle who also disappears at the same time. Ominous. So that must be Gabriel's spy, possible assassin, which I'm not. Please don't kill Philippa.
She's not gonna die.
I don't think so either, but
what do you think she is gonna do? Where's she off to?
I think she's gonna tell Lymond the secret. I think that's why she's left. Like, this is what finally convinced her, like, I have to let him know.
Yeah, I think her conscience is getting the better of her here. At least I hope that's what's happening. And I feel like she hates Lymond to this insane degree. But she's also like, she was raised by Kate and Gideon. Like, I think she's a good person at heart, again, with like the Jarrett connections. Like, I think they're good people at heart. And it's just her passionate disliked, her young teenager.
Yeah, unlike Jarrett, Philippa has the excuse that she's 13.
She's really young. And so, but I do think she's a good person at heart. And so I think her conscience is just getting to the best start. And instead of doing the intelligent thing, which would be to tell her mother, she decides to run off and fix it, maybe. So yeah.
A very Lymond thing to do.
Yeah.
Also tell his mother some important things earlier on.
Right. Could people just tell their mother things? Like, I feel like it would really help. But anyway.
All right, the Bog Hall meeting, Philippe.
Right.
But also, what is this special cartload of stuff that Cormac brings? That there is that one little.
Oh yeah, I didn't mention that at all.
He brought with him a peace offering, a special cartload from his contraband warehouse at Leith, which I'm like, is it explosives? Like, what is he bringing by the cartload into? So who knows?
Well, it's a peace offering.
Mm.
But is it a peace offering to Gabriel? In which case it's some sort of something that's going to cause massive chaos with the St. Mary's people and put Lymond even deeper into a very dark hole. Okay,
the Bog Hall meeting. So instead of sort of just going over this quickly and summarizing, I think we should just jump right into it. And because there's so much that happens and there's so many charges levied against Gabriel. So we should just start talking about it.
Okay, my first favorite thing is as soon as Lymond gives his opening statement, which is a wonderful opening statement, Lord Coulter thrust himself upright. Because he and Richard and Jared are very, very similar, like emotionally driven people. He stands up,
he's like, my God, are we?
And this, of course, then sets up how wonderful the reversal is when he does the same thing, but in Lymond, to protect Lymond.
So good.
And then, yeah, like you said, Lymond gives this great opening about how he's biased and he's got like all these major weaknesses in his argument, but he kind of turns that around and makes it like, if you believe me after this, it means you must be right. And he says that this is more important than individual failure or even individual life and death, which kind of, again, goes back to that moment in the tent where he makes this decision to take down this guy because he's so dangerous, even knowing that it's likely to really screw up his own life very badly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that Janet jumps in immediately, like right after this opening with the, you better make up your minds quick because he wants to marry Griselle. And it's just this really nice, like, hey, what he's saying has more weight than you think it does, and here's why. And so then they're able to lay out the, like, he's trying to get a lot of power. And it's such a motivation for the death of Will. Like, we find out why Will died.
And it makes you wonder, right? Like, did Lymond put Will's life at risk by drawing Gabriel into his circle? Or would it have been at risk anyway because Gabriel was going to try to seize power in Scotland one way or the other? But did he make it more likely to happen because he's close with Will, and by bringing Gabriel to St. Mary's, he like sets it up? Because it's definitely this, like, is the trade-off worth it? I've all the risk of the lives that will be lost trying to take down Gabriel.
But I think that argument presupposes that Lymond is responsible for Gabriel's choices, which he is not.
He's not, but he's responsible for luring him into, like, literally, it's like to Lymond's circle.
Yeah. But I reject the argument that, like, evil done by one person is the fault of someone else. Like, it just, because I think we hear that argument so much today. It's like, oh, if I hadn't done X, then Y wouldn't have happened. And I'm like, but Y was not your fault, even if you did X, like, it's just because you wore a short skirt to the party doesn't mean that the choice of the guy who raped you is your fault, And so I sort of feel like Lymond wore a short skirt to the party, but like the evil that was done by Gabriel was Gabriel's. And
I definitely don't think Lymond is in any way responsible for the evil Gabriel does. But I do think that Lymond made a conscious, like, ends versus means, like, sacrifice being worth it decision to bring Gabriel into his circle, knowing that it could hurt him or people he loves, and deciding that's worth it to take Gabriel down.
Maybe it was more that he should have brought more people. Like he should have had this conference at the beginning of the story instead of like if he had had this conference of 10 people or 15 people with the people who are not there. When he first got to Scotland and said, hey, I'm going to do this thing for this reason, keep an eye out for this guy.
Would he have had enough proof against Gabriel at that point?
Well, I think he wouldn't have needed it. He could have just said, keep an eye out for this. Like, I have these suspicions. Mm-hmm. Keep your guard up. You know.
I do think
they were destroying him.
Having had experiences with these kind of people, you just sound crazy when you try to point them out. It totally sounds like you are the nut and they're just another victim of yours.
And there's also the danger that if he had done that in the beginning, that because there was no proof yet, these people would have gone back to Gabriel and just trusted him even more.
And told him, hey, Lymond is saying these things about you. And then he would know that Lymond was going against him.
Right. That's true. Oh, true.
Okay, so then we have Jenny Fleming. Jenny Fleming might not be noted for her brain, but her emotional independence was considerable. And that's where she says he looks like God.
Oh, God.
Oh, God, of course.
Yeah. I love Alec Guthrie, too. It's like, he sounds like God, too. You'll never get the women on your side, Crawford, which is funny because it's actually the women that he convinces, you know, and it's not until the women are convinced that the men then become the women believe him. And it's like, I think it's a testament both to Lymond's ability to convince, but it's also a testament to like the practicality of the women. And that they're just like, oh yeah, we notice things and we see things, and the small bits of character. I mean, things like killing the cat and, you know, all of the with Jolita, you know, and it's like all those little things that they see. Oh, Gabriel was told not to tell Margaret about Tom. And then he told Margaret about Tom. And I think women are, at least in this period, like they don't have power as much or in the very same ways. And so being able to judge someone's character based on small choices would be really valuable. And I don't know, they see. I like the women.
Yeah, and I like how this interesting thing where Margaret's like, I don't like him, but I don't have a good reason for not liking him. And Sibylla points out, you're just more sensitive than most people. And you know, then she reveals that Gabriel actually knew, but it's like Margaret had sensed that there was some kind of malice there, something intentionally hurtful.
Right.
And then I love the way Lymond responds, where he realizes how hurt Margaret is, and he tells her, like, I don't want to put you through this. If you want to go, you should just go. And then, of course, she's like, no, I'm going to stay. Like, this guy hurt me on purpose. That makes me want to stay even more. But that his first reaction is to comfort her is really telling about who Lymond actually is underneath all this.
Yeah.
It's nice to know that there's something that happened that Lymond didn't know about as well. So like by bringing all of these people together, it's helping his cause, because they, like Dee said earlier, they all have tiny bits of the information, and he doesn't even have all of those bits yet. So,
right.
Yeah.
So then we also get the revelation that he got Adam addicted to drugs, which you guys already guessed. Good job.
Yeah.
And that Randy Bell is a drug addict.
I knew that I didn't trust Randy Bell at all, and now I hate him so much.
Yeah, he's terrible.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, it was obvious that the sort of flask by Lymond's side when Watt Scott came in, like it was just a complete manipulation. And
it surprised me though that Randy Bell killed Will Scott. I was not expecting that. I was
not expecting that either.
I was expecting like Gabriel set up the situation and then Will got killed because of the situation. I wasn't expecting like, no, he actually planted Randy there to kill Will. That's just horrible.
I thought it was a Kerr as well. The question now is Watt Scott going to believe this or not?
Well, if Janet believes it, I think there's a good chance. I have a lot of faith in Janet.
But Watt really wants to blame the Kerrs for it. I mean, he already kind of got his revenge, but...
Yeah, but I still have a lot of faith in Janet.
Yeah. Oh, I do too. Definitely.
I think they'll bring him around. And I think if she can point Watt Scott in the correct direction, like he's kind of like a bull in a china shop, you know, like he's definitely not subtle, But I feel like if she can kind of steer him in the correct direction, that he will be a force against Gabriel for sure. Like if he knows Gabriel killed his son, he's gonna be, or arranged for that to happen, he's gonna be fierce.
So we also get the revelation that Gabriel arranged the accident of the siege engine thing.
So I figured that one out as well.
Yeah.
Although Gabriel engineered it, but it was Randy Bell.
It was Randy
sort of
Bell who did it,
set it up.
Yeah. And then
I think that was one question we had back then when we were reading that section, was that Gabriel wasn't there. And so we're like, this seems like something he would have done, but he wasn't there. So we didn't know. Yeah.
He's got these little minions around.
Do we know why Randy Bell is his minion? Like, did he bring him with him, or did he just like bribe him when he got there or something? Like, is there a previous connection between them? Do we know that?
I feel like there almost has to be, because he's been working for him since almost the beginning of this St. Mary's section.
Right, but we haven't seen a previous connection, right? Okay.
It's not hard to manipulate a drug addict if you can supply them with drugs.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
And then we get the revelation that he's been trying to kill Philippa, but that Lymond doesn't know about the secret, right? He thinks it's the George Paris thing, which is interesting. What else?
They talk a little bit about what happened with the Starotech and that the theft of that religious icon, which I'm still a little confused about. I mean, I guess Graham has just been sort of manipulating the greed and Christopher Plummer, Lancelot Plummer. Oh God, Christopher Plummer.
Lancelot.
Yeah. No, it goes back to what Lymond was saying when he was like, if I was going to try to mess with Gabriel on Malta, I would get people around me and I'd figure out their weaknesses and use those to manipulate them into being loyal to me. So Gabriel goes and finds everybody's weakness. And in these guys' cases, it's this desire to like collect antiques that then he manipulates into this like, stealing thing that then he can use against them. Oh, and we get the whole revelation that the hot trod, which, took days and wandering around everywhere, that Gabriel manipulated that whole thing and even manipulated Philippa to be at Little Keep. Like he was trying to get all these pieces together and he almost succeeded.
Yeah.
And that he was trying to get, sorry, go ahead.
Well, just also that we also find out that Lymond's known about the whole George Paris thing, and people are like, well, why didn't you say anything? And he's like, well, it didn't really matter.
The definition of a MacGuffin. Yeah. So then there's this big reveal about what was supposed to happen at Dumbarton, which is that Jarrett was supposed to be the one. Like Randy was timing it. He was supposed to barge in just as like Lymond was in bed with Jolita, and then Jarrett was supposed to discover them, and then Jarrett was supposed to, like, I guess, kill Lymond and pave the way then for Gabriel to take over. But luckily, Adam intervened, told Jarrett to go let Randy in, and hid Jolita.
Yay, Adam!
Yay!
And then I like again that Lymond apologizes to Richard for having been in that situation. And he also, so then there's some interesting things he says about how Gabriel has been destroying his reputation, taking every opportunity to malign his character, feeding Philippa's dislike of him, and making his relationship with Jarrett worse. So he explicitly says that Gabriel has been poisoning his relationship with Jarrett, which if you reread, you can totally see. It's super entertaining.
Yeah. And not surprising. I mean, of course, Gabriel wants like this super beautiful, competent guy to be like completely devoted to him and, to put one over on Lymond and like, yeah.
Well, and there's just something cruel, like to take his childhood friend away and make him hate.
Gabriel. So then they sort of start extolling the lack of virtues in Jolita, getting into that section where we get more information from Jenny.
Lady Jenny sparkled when they start gossiping about Jolita.
I know. And I love that, like, she's Graham's greatest asset, and just that Jenny sees how he's using Jolita to do all these things, and she's kind of delighting in that knowledge.
Yeah. And then it's interesting also, we get the revelation of what Gabriel was planning the whole time with Jolita, which was to have Lymond, ensnared in his net by, if he didn't fall in love with Gabriel and Malta, falling in love with Jolita in Scotland. And he flat out says it would have saved him a lot of trouble if he could have just had me as another like devoted disciple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love the Richard's response to, so they give this whole thing on 498 about how Jolita's not a virgin and all this stuff. And then it says, Gabriel knows it, like that this he's well aware of it. And Richard's response is, Gabriel knows it, but this is sacrilegious rubbish, And I think part of that is just totally motivated by the fact that Richard himself would never do that. Like that he can't even comprehend that a brother would use his sister in this way, which is of course wrapped up in their own sister and, her early death and all of that. But that Richard finds it completely incomprehensible that a person could actually do this. Like, it's sacrilegious.
Well, and also that he's bought into this holiness of Gabriel to say that it's sacrilegious to accuse Gabriel of such a thing. Like, people are not getting that Gabriel is a human. He is not this like vessel of God on earth.
Right. So holy. But
so is that the real reason Gabriel sent Jolita to Scotland in the beginning, as a future snare to try and capture Lymond?
I think that's the implication. Yeah. Because Lymond's quite capable and competent. Having him as a loyal minion of Gabriel would be super useful for Gabriel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it speaks to, if that was Gabriel's plan from the beginning, like that's way before he met Lymond. So it like speaks to his Lymond's reputation
mm-hmm.
and how far it had gone. If Gabriel also, did Gabriel know that Lymond was coming to Malta that early? Like,
maybe he was always playing the Scotland backup plan thing.
Yeah. I mean, he did lose his lands in Scotland, so having some sort of like, I need to get power in Scotland plan makes sense.
I mean, there's definitely a degree to which Gabriel is like this nearly omniscient supervillain that is extremely unrealistic. But like most of these books are not very realistic. So.
Like, I feel like this whole sending Jolita to Scotland to seduce Lymond thing is a little bit like, really? Before he even knows him?
It makes for a good story.
Seems like quite a long shot, but
he's just that good. He's a very good chess player, Gabriel.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Lymond also says, this is interesting if you go back and reread what's going on with him. He says that part of his refusal of Jolita was he was hoping that when Gabriel found out it wouldn't be easy, maybe he won't come. So he was sort of like hoping Gabriel would just go away, I guess, even though he did build this whole trap for Gabriel. So I guess he kind of knew he wouldn't. And then the revelation, which we already kind of figured out, that when she came to St. Mary's, the reason she was there was to stay the night so that, there'd be more doubt cast on like how early he was sleeping with her and could have fathered her baby. And then, of course, the whole Dumbarton thing was totally arranged by Gabriel, like down to the minute of like when, Jarrett was supposed to burst in and catch them. And he, of course, was the one that tipped Jolita off, obviously.
And he's the one that gave him the information that Thompson was there waiting for him. So,
yeah. Okay, and then my favorite bit here is the words that Lymond says about Jarrett. Poor bloody Jarrett, torn in two. Luckily, Jarrett is an intelligent man as well as an honest one, and it didn't happen. One of the things I have promised myself is to get Jarrett out of this safely.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Lymond has a giant blind spot with Jarrett in that he thinks way more highly of Jarrett than Jarrett deserves. And it's just super adorable. Like, Lymond really likes Jarrett. And I think he's wrong. I think Jarrett's an idiot, but Lymond really loves him.
Yeah. I mean, I think I like this about Lymond, that he has this sort of loyalty to his childhood friend, and he wants to, he's sort of excusing a lot of Jarrett's horribleness because he's been manipulated by Gabriel and he wants to get him out from under Gabriel's influence. I really like that about Lymond. I completely agree that Jared is undeserving of this. I think it's, maybe he will redeem himself later. I do love this image that they said Gabriel had intended Jarrett to be his Baptist, meaning John the Baptist. So he was supposed to be like this forerunner person that would then like pave the way for the arrival of Christ / Gabriel. It's like, whoa. Yeah. So, and I think, you know, Lymond, when he says that, is being super sarcastic, but at the same time, it's how people.
And this is how Gabriel works. He plays out these like religious tropes by puts himself in like the role of the Holy One, and it's really powerful, and it works because in this culture, these tropes are super powerful.
Yeah. I also love that Adam's insight here when Lymond is talking. He says, even now, when what he was saying was both disagreeable and emotional in content and so momentous for his own future, he talked as if giving them yet another of his precise, coldly documented briefings. And so you just get this picture of Lymond like being somewhat stoic and cold as he gives all this stuff out. And yet it's so important. And
then right after that, Adam wonders where Sibylla's vast store of warmth had gone. And I think this is like, Adam is super perceptive, but he's still missing this depth that's in Lymond that Lymond keeps so hidden. And it really hasn't come out at all in this book. Nowhere that Adam would see it.
Yeah. And I think most people do. Like most people don't see him in that way. You know, go back to Christian, seeing him when he had amnesia. You know.
That's why those Christian scenes are so important, because the reader gets that view into who Lymond really is underneath all the trauma and all the walls that he puts up. So that I mean, hopefully that will win your loyalty to the really good person that he is underneath, and then like you'll still be able to get through all these horrible things he does because you know that that's underneath.
Yeah. Also, I love that Margaret gives him water. Like he doesn't Margaret comes in with all these glasses and she puts one down in front of him and he doesn't touch it, and then she's like, yours is water. So good.
And he's very grateful. It's so sweet.
Yeah. And then Sibylla's comment about, you should stay sober and the rest of us need to get drunk.
And so then we get that revelation that he was trying to convert Jolita, which is just the dumbest thing. I don't even know what to say about it. There was always a chance. Sure did.
Okay, so what was the bit about, there was a loon on the watch in the courtyard that night who was gay interested in your window. Did you not see him? The master of the revels. Yes, I saw him. Look, the moment, blah, 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 blah. Was that Belle? Like, who was that? Did I just miss that completely?
I don't know who the Master of Revels is supposed to be, but I'm assuming that this was the spy who was watching it in order to let Belle know this is when you need to go up. So.
Okay. So we're not supposed, I was like, did I just miss who this person is? Okay, so we're not supposed to know yet who it is. Okay.
Belle would need to know exactly which room to burst into.
Right. Okay.
And then Lymond says, the next step in this whole chess game is for Lymond to be accused of fathering Jolita's baby in an atmosphere so emotional that reason must be swept away entirely, since he can prove that he's not the father.
Yeah. Also, I love that both Jenny and Sibylla pick up on the fact that Jolita is like, she's lying really badly to give people the impression that to let people know that she's pregnant. And they're both like, yeah, nobody's that bad of a liar. Like she's definitely doing this on purpose.
Well, and not only that she's pregnant, but that she was at Dumbarton with Lymond. Yeah. So everyone's gonna know. It's the same tricks Gabriel uses where he's like, oh, don't go there.
Right.
Trying to get someone.
Yeah.
And then we have that revelation of what Lymond says is his only strength, which is that Gabriel is vain. and has conducted his campaign without truly examining his pawns except for their faults. And one, there's that chess metaphor explicitly, like Gabriel's playing a chess game and they're all his pawns. And then this is where Lymond says that, you know, Gabriel missed his only virtue, which is persistence. And obviously we know he has many other virtues, but it is notable that like he thinks that Gabriel, like his one advantage in this situation is that Gabriel doesn't know that he knows, and that he's persistent enough to pursue it.
But also I think it's like Gabriel plays on all the weaknesses of his pawns, but Lymond is going to play with their strengths, you know? And I think that's a huge difference between them, which is Gabriel is manipulating people based on their weaknesses. And Lymond, we have to say, is definitely manipulating people too. Like he does that, but he's trying to get them to rise to their strengths instead of playing on their weaknesses. And that's such a great contrast between the two of them.
100%. Look at how he manipulated Will in the first book to rise up and be a better leader in Scotland, and look at how he manipulated Robin to try to get Robin to rise up and be a better person.
Yeah, and he does it with Adam. Like I feel like Adam is a success. Like Will was a success, Adam is a success. So like Gabriel is manipulating Adam using his weaknesses, and Lymond is pulling him up with his strengths. And
so then we have, of course, that revelation that Gabriel got Will killed, which if you don't hate him already, hopefully at this point now you really, really hate him.
And Randy Bell, that bastard.
So did Lymond see Randy Bell kill Will Scott?
No, he saw the angle of the cut and he knew it had to come from above.
Okay. Because it says I was in the middle. So it was Will on the stair, and then Randy Bell, and then Lymond. And because he says he took the brunt of he said he took the brunt of the rush for the stairs. I was in the middle and Crawford at the top when they burst in, and he pushed past us all.
I think there was a bunch of people. It was a dark stairwell.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't just like the three of them in a row.
Okay.
Yeah. But in this mad rush in the dark, Randy was in the middle enough to like get up close behind Will and cut him down from behind and not be seen.
But he knew when he saw his body.
Yeah. Which makes sense because Lymond knew by this point that Gabriel had arranged this whole thing.
Yeah.
And we sort of see all of the little things now that Randy Bell has done. Aside from just killing him, he was the one that sort of set up the contraption, the siege engine. He was the one that gave the key to the keep to the Cares, and sort of all of these other small parts that Gabriel would not have been around for, but was still implicitly in charge of. Like Randy Bell's the one that killed the old Turnbull man that would have been like, no, it wasn't us. We were paid to do this. So.
Yeah, and just that, like Lymond's had Tosh shadowing Buccleuch because the next step is to kill Buccleuch and take over.
So then there's this interesting part, 503, where Lymond speculates about Gabriel and how he became the way he is, where he talks about how, he knew that Gabriel is this man of evil intent. Perhaps he was once all he appears to be. Perhaps he plumbed too early the false places of religion and of violence. Perhaps he grew bored with his great skills. Perhaps, as he once confessed to me, the sheer love of power corrupted what was never very difficult to corrupt. Perhaps he is insane. Like, this is interesting. What do you guys think is going on there?
I mean, could it be all of it? Like, that I feel like it's perhaps not just one reason. Like, I think he got bored and was corrupted and is a little bit insane. And, I think perhaps all of that is coming together. Yeah. He's a great and dangerous man.
It is difficult to sort of see his past and how he's been known in this holy paragon of virtue, and then to see him degraded into what he's trying to do now. And there is a disconnect somewhere. So was he always a charlatan, or did something happen along the way to sort of...
I mean, it makes me wonder about like how do people descend into really terrible hate behavior? It's usually a series of small decisions. You know, it's usually not that someone really, really good and nice all of a sudden, you know, commits murder or something. Usually not, unless it's in, you know, an act of passion. But usually it's like they make a small decision that's slightly wrong, and then they make another small decision that's slightly wrong, and then they just go and sort of justify as they sort of sink into worse and worse behavior until they're, you know, embezzling millions from their company or something like that. You know, it starts out with, I cheated on my taxes, and ends up with, not that that's good, like, not that that's a small thing, but it starts out with like, I claimed $200 on my taxes and ends up with embezzling $3 million from your company, you know? So it's like I think that's, he could have been okay at the beginning. And
yeah, I interpret it as he probably got into this initially, like, not, you know, planning to be a supervillain, but I think he just started realizing how easily he could manipulate people and like getting off on it. Yeah. And just getting better and better at it and being like, how far can I push this? What can I get them to do? And there's like no limits. And also like, I'm so smart and I'm so awesome and I can like just get people to do what I want. I must be a god. I should take over the world.
It makes me curious about the Knights of Malta back there, and like how much, it's another thing I want to look at when I reread it, like how much was, you know, Juan de Jimenez not actually in power at all, and if Gabriel, like, did Gabriel like embezzle all that money from the Knights, and everybody's blaming it on the Grandmaster? Although he does seem to be a genuinely horrible person as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't excuse Juan de Jimenez anything.
No.
That's kind of why I want to know more about what happened in Malta and what Nicholas de Nicolay knows. So I think we'll find out by the end of the book more. So
So then we also have this revelation where Lymond says, I could have killed Graham Mallet or fought him, meaning like I could have just assassinated him, but then I would have been killed and I didn't want to like just die for that. So this is why I decided to lure him here and fight him, which again is like, okay, he could have just assassinated him and Will Scott wouldn't have died. It would have been at the sacrifice of his own life. So like I probably would have done the same thing Lymond does, try to fight him and have the chance of like nobody dying.
Right.
But basically,
Also, I kind of wonder, like, I do genuinely believe that Lymond could have assassinated him in a way that didn't come back to him. Like, he's a really smart guy.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of those things that, like, you know, we wouldn't have had a book if Lymond had just assassinated him quietly.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It would have solved the problem.
But I think he could have done it.
Also, like, Lymond is not the kind of person that would just quietly assassinate somebody. You know?
Right.
You know. And yeah, then basically this implication that the whole idea behind St. Mary's is this like trap for Gabriel. And then we have Sibylla saying no principles and no philosophy and for money alone, which is quoting what Lymond said about it from the beginning. So he made this whole thing about how it's totally amoral and there's no good purpose. And then the revelation that actually the whole thing was super moral. It was to try to stop this evil person from hurting the world.
Yeah, and Sibylla's just like, really? Yeah. She's so great.
And then this is where we get the revelation that Dragut knows more about this, and that Graham was working for Dragut in some form or fashion.
That was the piece of information that I was shocked by. I was like, what? I mean, I knew they were working together. Like, you know that they have some sort of more of a relationship than they should have, clearly. But the Mallet was working for him. I was like, what?
Yeah, I want to know more about that.
Could we have picked up on that and we just missed it?
I mean, they're sitting around in the tent gossiping, and like Gabriel arranges
Right.
for Groot to take Una and the baby. So like they have a relationship.
Right. I knew they had a relationship, and clearly they had a relationship that they shouldn't have had. Like he should not be that cozy with the enemy, obviously. But the fact that Lymond says like that Gabriel was working for Dragoon, like, whoa, that's a quite a bit further down that road than just being cozy with the enemy.
And of further interest, after all, Mallet was working for him, but only Jarrett perhaps would fully understand. So Jarrett has more pieces of this information that I think we'll get.
Yeah. Oh, maybe that's the thing. Maybe if somebody puts the pieces of that together for Jarrett, that will be the thing. That
could be.
I really hope that he does break this spell that Gabriel has over him.
It's so funny to think about how Gabriel was so like, we must kill the Turks, they're so evil, and like, and then you realize, oh, he's working with them. Like that's just total bullshit. He doesn't believe it at all.
Yeah.
And also, like, if you go back and reread, not only is he like cozying around with Dragoot, you know, in his tent, like eating grapes or whatever and gossiping, but also he's like the one who's got free reign of the camp and can wander around and like it is pretty suspicious.
Yeah, I mean, I just assumed that he was some sort, like that he had some sort of like liaison or something with the Turks, and that he was furthering his own ends by being, which he was, but yeah, just that being in their pay or something. It's like, whoa.
Yeah, and so this is also where Lymond basically reveals that he doesn't think they're going to believe him. He thinks he's going to die. And he's like, when I die, then you'll know I was telling the truth. So pursue Gabriel to the ends of the earth, for wherever he is, there will be nothing but waste, which is like also like how he sees Gabriel is this like destructive force against the planet. Like no matter where he goes, it's not just about Scotland, it's stop him no matter where in the world he is.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
No.
Yeah, and then it's just like, oh no, Richard's gonna ruin it.
And then we have Adam feels Lymond in the gloom, give some movement at once controlled. So like this hurt Lymond a lot to have Richard seem to be denying even this. But then Richard comes through.
Yeah,
Richard.
Yay. And Sibylla's crying. Like that. Yeah.
Yeah, like, oh, my sons are, you know, reconciled kind of again.
And I just love that I am with you, you know, that Richard is, you know, this may be a crusade conducted by the Coulter family solo and a band of dissidents, but I am with you.
And the way that Lymond had braced himself, like he's bracing himself for the pain of this not working. So like this, just the fact that he's like really opened up, which we know is so hard for him. He's bared all this stuff. He's awaiting their judgment. He thinks it's going to fail. He's bracing himself for it to not work. And then it works. And Richard stands by him. And then everybody stands by him. And they all like are on his side.
Yeah. Also, why does Guthrie call Gabriel a false diamond of Canada? Like, what is that?
I have no idea. I assumed from that like in the early days of the discovery of the Americas, like the European invaders brought back things that looked like diamonds but weren't from Canada.
From Canada?
If you were around back then, you would know.
Did they even call Canada Canada in the 1700s though? Wasn't it like
1700s?
Might have been something different.
I mean, the 1500s, right? Yeah, the 1500s. I don't think it was called Canada back then. Is Canada somewhere else, like someplace in India or North Africa or something? Is it?
I have no
Might
idea.
be.
Good question.
Yeah. Like, that just kind of pulled me out of the story a little bit. I was like, what is a false diamond of Canada?
If anybody's watching knows, please leave a comment.
Yeah. What is that?
It's probably explained in one of the guides. I should go look.
I love how, in Adam's estimation, where is it exactly? Lady Jenny from jealousy alone would support any man who maligned Jolita. So it's like, oh, even if he doesn't win her completely over, it's the jealousy for Jolita that's going to sort of come through for her.
she doesn't like her.
I love also that part of the reason Richard believes Lymond is he says, because you are asking for help and you hate asking for help. He actually knows his brother really well in that moment and brings some insight to the table. Go, Richard.
Yeah. And I love that, like, everyone's sort of like, I'm with you. And Richard sat down, satisfaction on his face. And he's just like, okay, we're gonna do this. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting also, like Alec, who's also very insightful, he says, we all must remember and keep remembering that this is not the church against the rebellious instinct, just as it is not a struggle of Christian values perverted against a great faith. So like Gabriel tries to make it these things, but it's not. Like, that's not actually what's going on here at all. That's just this like surface performance. It's not the reality.
Yeah. And this, like, calling it rebellious intellect, actually, and not instinct. And I think that that's interesting because it's not the church against the rebellious intellect. And that's such an argument that happens with the church a lot, that is like education and intellect and all of that is where like liberal thinking goes, and you know, the conservative church is against that. And that's a time from time immemorial that's been an argument. And he's saying, like, that's not what this is. And it's not that like Lymond is this blasphemous genius and Gabriel is holy and all of that. And yeah,
I mean, once you realize that all these arguments they've been having are just a manipulation tactic, and there's no real religious belief underlying any of this, and there's not even like a theological argument except for the one that like the representatives of God on earth are humans and humans are fallible too. Like, but that's not what's going on. What's going on is just this attempt to seize power and this attempt to stop the seizure of power. It has nothing to do with God.
Yeah. Nor does it. And it's like, in that attempt, it's a false dichotomy to set those up as opposed to each other anyway. You know, and just like, and I think that's what Gabriel's been doing this whole time. He's been setting up all these false dichotomies. You know, it's like this or this, and it's none of it is what's happening.
Well, yeah, and it's super interesting to go back and reread, because you just see how Gabriel keeps creating these false dichotomies. He keeps putting Lymond in this position of like this rebellious intellect against, you know, the church. And like, that's not what Lymond is doing at all. Like, Lymond kind of starts playing along eventually, but like that's not actually happening.
It doesn't seem like, I don't think, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't feel like I've ever really seen Lymond have any strong feelings at all about the church. Like, he doesn't seem to, like, other than particular people, like there might be particular people in the situation, but it doesn't seem like he's got any sort of beef with the church or positive feelings either. Like, it's just, he's just kind of,
he's got issues with the knights for very good
reason. For sure. Yeah. But he doesn't seem to have he doesn't seem to be pro or anti-God in any strong way. And
it's all a situation Gabriel has constructed. Lymond himself has done nothing one way or the other to sort of reveal a bias. And in the very end, I just absolutely love the bit where Adam sees Lymond, who's stepped out of the room, and he's just like holding onto this woodwork of the window with his fingers white with pressure. This revelation of the intensity of what he's really feeling, which was so hidden under that cool surface the whole time.
And it's interesting that Adam sees both. You know, that he notices he's the one who comments on that cool surface, and then he sees the reality of what Lymond's hands are doing.
Well, exactly, right? Watch his hands.
Yeah.
Oh. Yay.
This was good.
It's out in the open now, finally.
Yeah, so what's going to happen next?
Well, we've got 4 more chapters, so we're definitely towards the end of this book. I'm worried for Philippa. I don't think any harm is going to come to her, but I know there's going to be an attempt. I'm worried for Buccleuch now even more, considering that that's the next sort of part of his plan. I mean, he still would need to marry Griselle, but it seems like if Lymond fails, then that's definitely going to happen. So, Gabriel.
Yeah. And I agree with both of those. I don't think Philippa is gonna die, but yeah, I'm definitely worried about her. And what I really want to happen, which I don't actually think is going to happen, but there's a point where Lymond said something about like there's plans you need to know about, like everyone's going to do their part or something. Like there was some indication of like, you know, we're going to have there's a big plan here, but we're going to eat first, and so we don't see that in this chapter. I would love to see like the layout of the plan and then the execution of the plan, like sort of like Ocean's 11-esque, you know, it's like, here's what we're going to do. And then like play out the plan and stuff. I mean, I don't think we're going to get that because I feel like Dunnett's so fond of like skipping over things. So I feel like we're going to see the plan, but maybe not have an idea of what it is until it actually plays out in front of us. But it sure would be fun to have that.
Any final thoughts, questions, comments?
Just going back to me being worried about Buccleuch, I guess it just matters on what happened historically to him, which I don't know, because he is a historical character. So I don't know if this is a complete fabrication or if, you know, we'll see.
Right. That's another reason I'm not quite as worried about Philippa, is that she's a made-up character. So like I feel like there's no like point where she has to be dead because of that. So that helps a little bit. I do have an interesting thought that this dawned on me a little bit ago when we were talking about the babies, because we have two babies that are in question. If Jolita had a baby and something happened to her baby, and we also have Una and Lymond's baby. So there are two babies floating around that we don't know. We know where Una's baby is right now. We don't know where Jolita's baby is right now. But they're also both sort of blondish babies, I'm assuming. Like if Jolita, if this baby is Gabriel's, which it's so gross, but I really do think it is, then we've probably got a blonde baby floating around, and we got another blonde baby floating around. And even though it's over the top that these babies would encounter each other, this is an over the top series. So I feel like the fact that we have these floating babies somewhere is like, I want to know I wonder if we're going to find out what happened to Jolita's first baby in this book. It seems like that's a thread that's just dangling. So
what do you want to happen?
Honestly, nothing, because I want Lymond to go get his son and then bring him back to Scotland and have him grow up with Sibylla and Lymond and like and Una if she survives. Like I just that's what I want to happen, but it's totally not going to happen that way. So I think Lymond's going to go off on an adventure to try and find his son. Like
I agree.
That seems like I think as soon as he finds out that this kid exists, he's going to go herring off to wherever to go find him.
Well, then what do you think is going to happen if you don't think they're all going to go live in Scotland in a happy little family?
There's
I
just
have no idea.
Yeah. It's too much to try and predict, I think.
Yeah,
I agree with him herring off to find Caredon wherever he is at the moment, but
yeah. But yeah, who knows? And with Gabriel, this revelation that Gabriel worked for Dragut, I'm like, what if Dragut has the other baby? Like, because they have a lot stronger connection than I thought they did.
Stop.
So does that mean that if Jolita's baby got like smuggled out of Malta or wherever, who knows? She was in a convent. That just seems super weird. Like she's pregnant at a convent in Malta? Like I just find that bizarre. Like how are people not aware of this?
Isn't that how they hide pregnant girls though back in the day? They put
but I think people know about it. Like when a girl like goes off to the convent for a year, like it's sort of known. So anyway, like the fact that Jarrett has no clue about any of this is just
Oh, but I mean,
anyway, but I wonder if Dragut has both of these kids, like somehow. Like that's anyway.
What do you want to happen with Gabriel? I like how our cats are guest starring at the end of her video.
She was bothering me for the past half an hour to come up, so I finally picked her up. So
Hello, kitty.
What do you want to happen to Gabriel?
I want him to stick around for at least another book. He's too good of a villain to lose right away. So, but I think he'll that really scared her.
Careful. I think the what Deanne wants to happen to the character of Gabriel is different from what Deanne the reader wants to happen in the story. So like me, I would like Gabriel to get like thrown into a deep pit for the rest of his life and like, you know, solitary confinement, fed on bread and water, and, you know, die in prison decades and decades later. But as a reader, I want him to escape and like feel free to, you know, wreak havoc for the next several books. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and I think he's gonna wreak havoc for the next several books. He's just such a good character. Like it's surely that's gonna happen.
What about Jolita?
I don't know. I have a hard time
about her.
She's not as good of a villain because she's kind of dominant. Yeah. She's like too obvious.
Yeah, she's too obvious. She's too controlled by her emotions, and
she might become some sort of prisoner to be used as leverage against Gabriel. Like maybe that'll be like a card that Lymond has up his sleeve.
But does he even care about her as more than a pawn? Like, I don't know.
I'm beginning to think that maybe he doesn't.
Yeah, I don't think he does. I mean, I think he talks a good game about how she's his only heaven or something like that. But yeah, I have a sneaking suspicion he doesn't really care, except for how she reflects on him.
Even if he wasn't evil, what an awful pressure to put on a kid.
So I have no clue.
All right. Any other thoughts or hopes or anything?
Not as of now.
I get this feeling with this group of 10 people. It's like, I have this emotional feeling of like the band's getting back together, even though they were never together to begin with. Like, it's not like they were a band at the beginning at all. But I just have this feeling it's like, okay, we're going to go storm the castle, you know?
Yeah.
So I want to see this like all come together, and yeah.
It's a really good group with like, you know, the men of St. Mary's, but also like Jenny Fleming and Margaret Erskine.
Yeah, Jenny Fleming would do anything to get back in my good graces.
Yeah. But yeah, I want to see like Margaret and Sibylla like work together to get stuff done, and you know, maybe Kate will get drawn into it with Philippa, and then who knows? Maybe.
Well, then thank you everyone for watching, and happy holidays, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
See you then.